Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Garden Stay Growing, where not only do I show you where I pick my vegetables and how I grow them, but also tonight how I'm going to cook them. So I'm going to take this plethora of the carrots that I got the other night. I'm going to pick a few chosen ones out of there. I do have some sweet potato fingerlings right here that I'm going to add into this dish as well. So I'm going to clean this all up. I'm going to get my ingredients together, and when I do, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to show you the recipe and show you how easy it is to put this dish together, and it's just absolutely amazing. Alright guys, I have my rough ingredients here for this dish. I'm going to excite this dish at a basic level of cooking, a basic level of ingredients. And then as the recipe goes on, we're going to take it to another notch and another notch and another notch or another level or whatever you want to call it, but that's okay. But I'm going to tell you, just at the first iteration, just the roasting of the carrots, you're absolutely going to love this. I didn't have exactly what I wanted to do in my mind. I just had like a general idea, so I'm just going to flow with it. I'm going to make this dish out of a combination of a lot of other dishes that I've made before in the past. So this recipe is actually a 3-in-1 recipe, and I will actually show you as we go along how you can actually separate this recipe into 3 different recipes and utilize it whatever way you want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring you in, I'm going to show you the ingredients that I picked for this recipe and all the spices and everything else, and see what you think. Believe it or not, these are the only main ingredients to this dish. I know it does look like a lot, but it doesn't have to be for you. I'm telling you, I just kind of went and took the extra step because I have the ingredients and I chose to do it. For example, this nutmeg over here, you do not have to use fresh nutmeg, but I do encourage you to do it because it has such a different flavor than the things that have been ground before, including the cinnamon. And don't be fooled, yes, I did ground the nutmeg with this file, but I did not do the cinnamon. For that, I did use the grinder in the back there. These were the fingerling sweet potatoes that I pulled out of the ground because they need to be pulled up. They weren't going to grow any bigger. They're pretty useless, but I figured they would actually do very well in this dish. And then if we slide over here, we see the carrots that I picked out. There is a huge variety of yellow and red and orange and purple and pink carrots. Some of them I left whole, some of them I just cut down the middle. I barely peeled them. I really didn't feel it was necessary to go in and remove all that skin since they were such young carrots. And then here I have an onion, about half an onion, medium sliced, and some diced garlic. And we're gonna go right ahead with some coriander, some marjoram, and just a tiny bit of thyme. As far as like measurements, it's gonna be like 1/4 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon, and 1/8 teaspoon of thyme. So let's back out a little bit. Those on the right, those were the carrots that I had to pick through tonight. And then over here we have 2 other ingredients, a surprise ingredient, besides the oil and the butter. Are you guys ready? So let's get cooking, all right? So the first thing we're gonna wanna do is get some heat on this pan and just turn it up to high and start letting it go. Now in the meantime, I want to check my ingredients. I want to make sure I have everything that I have: the nutmeg, the cinnamon, the marjoram, the coriander, the thyme, the garlic, the onions, the carrots, the sweet potatoes, salt, butter, and olive oil. And I'm not going to let you in on the last 2 secret ingredients that we have because they are going to be a surprise if you hang out to the back. I'm going to take my hand. Yeah, it's getting a little warm. I'm not touching the pan, just going over the top. Yeah, it's getting a little warm. Alright, so at this point, the only thing that you have to recognize that is a difference about the ingredients of this dish is I'm going to add these sweet potatoes first. They are going to take just a little bit longer than the carrots are going to take. So I'm going to throw them in first at 5 minutes. If you don't have fingerling sweet potatoes, which I suspect you don't, but if you wanted to take a bigger one and cut it down to like fry shape and throw that in, I'm sure that would turn out just as well. I'm just using these because I have them. So All right, so that was about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Just enough to coat the pan on the bottom. It's a little heavy, and I'm okay with that. I'm gonna let that go. I'm gonna get a little glass of water. Normally I would just lick my fingers and dip it in there, but because of COVID, I would never do that. A little bit more. All right, so right now I'm gonna throw these little sweet potato fingerlings in there. All right, so I've had these fingerling sweet potatoes on there, and the one thing I was always taught was season at every layer. I'd rather put a tiny, tiny little pinch, less than 1/8 of a teaspoon, and put it on now, and let these, these sweet potatoes absorb a little bit of that salt. Than doing a heavy application in the beginning, or a heavy application at the end, or a heavy application in the middle when they say add a teaspoon of salt. I don't know what to say about that. That's a recipe for grossness. So these sweet potatoes have been on here, and I'm gonna start layering these beautiful carrots that I picked out. It's like a purple outside. I intentionally did not peel off the skin. You're more than capable of eating the skin. Now, as of right now, I have done nothing but add just a pinch of salt to the sweet potatoes. It's going to need just a little bit more oil, maybe half a teaspoon. I don't know, just don't let it go dry. So for right now, that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna let them roast in this pan for another 5, maybe 10 minutes on medium to high heat. Let them roast up. I'm gonna give them a shuffle. I'm gonna give them a flip. I already got some nice browning going on those sweet potatoes, a little puffing up. That's really nice. And when we come back, we'll start adding in a little bit more of the vegetables and some of these spices. All right, I've been tossing and turning these bad boys for about an additional 5 or 10 minutes at this point. I see some nice golden brown. We'll give them some flips. I haven't added any salt since I added the little bit of salt that I did from the sweet potatoes earlier, so I'm going to add another tiny little pinch, that's all. So at this point, I want to start adding the additional vegetables that I want to go at. I will say, if you just let this go another 5 or 10 minutes and then add butter and salt, you're going to be absolutely fine. Beautiful meal. But let's take this to another level, and I'm going to go and I'm going to add my onions. I ring them and then I cut them in half. It was just half of a medium-sized onion, but I really want these to melt down, so I'm going to drop the temperature a little bit because I don't want them to burn. I just want them to melt as these harder root vegetables are taking it. So I'm going to let this go for about, let's say, medium to low temperature for about 10 minutes, and we'll see where we end up. At that point, I'll come back and I'll see if we have to adjust anything. All right, guys. So I've let it, reduce down for another couple minutes and just roast up in this pan on top of the stove. I have seasoned it twice with salt at this point, and I have not tasted it, which is shame on me. I'm supposed to taste things every time I add a layer of seasoning. So at this point, the only thing I added was salt, so I'm gonna take a little piece of onion and I'm gonna taste it and see the, beautiful. Okay. So now the onions are reducing down. They're looking semi-transparent at this point. I'm going to add these 2 cloves of garlic that have been roughly chopped. And what I want to do at this point, because now I'm going to start messing around with my spices. And I really had an idea going, and then at the end I was like, thyme. I think thyme would really go well with these vegetables. I mean, it's practically Thanksgiving sitting in your face. You got garlic, onions, carrots, sweet potatoes. It's Thanksgiving in your face. But I'm not going for that necessarily savory taste of that, but I want to bring that through. So I only have a little bit. And it is dry thyme. Remember, if you're going to use dried herbs, they are stronger than fresh herbs for the most part. So I have about 1/8 of a teaspoon of thyme that I'm going to add to this. And then I have, now this combination, the coriander, no, is it, no, I'm sorry, cardamom and marjoram. I have a parsnip recipe that works really well with these two flavors, but I think, I mean, carrots and parsnips are right next to each other. I think that they would be really good together. So I'm gonna go with the marjoram first, and this is about 1/4 of a teaspoon, and I'm gonna cut it shy just a little bit, and I'm gonna do the same thing with this cardamom right here, because I can always add more later on. So I've initiated those flavors, the garlic, the cardamom, the marjoram. But there's like one real element to this dish that's completely missing right now, and that's a creaminess of a butter. I'm not going to add that right now because I need to let these cook down a little bit more. I don't want butter to burn, but I don't want these seasonings to burn either. And I'm feeling the tenderness of all of these carrots, and some of them are where my wife likes them really tender, and some of them are a little al dente, but that's okay because I want these onions to caramelize and cook down a lot more, actually. All right, everyone, so I've let it go for another like 5 to 7 minutes, and now here's where we're going to take it to a completely different level. So I want you to know, at any time, you could have stopped this dish after you roasted just the carrots, before the onions, before the garlic, before the herbs, before everything. You could have stopped this dish and it would have been a marvelous dish. But now I'm going to take it into the fall season. I'm going to take it to where I really love this dish, and I really, really, really love fresh nutmeg, and I cannot stand fake nutmeg, but you do you. So I'm going to put a decent amount of fresh nutmeg, 2 pinchfuls, probably 1/4 of a teaspoon. A pinch is about 1/8 of a teaspoon. And then I have some cinnamon here, and it's just some pungent fresh cinnamon that I did in my coffee grinder. And I'm going to add this, but all I'm going to add is that one little pinch because it is very pungent. And then I'm going to mix this up. I'm going to give this a tiny little taste. I don't know, maybe this broken little sweet potato here. Okay. Fantastic. Stop this video. That's where you want to be. Now, here's where we're going to take it up to another level. At the very end, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to drop this heat, and I'm going to take a good pinch of salt, lay it on top. We're going to go in for another little bite. Make sure the salt and the butter content is great. Whew. So there's where I want you to stop this video. Right here, what you're tasting is a complete and utter masterpiece. The olive oil, the butter, the salt, the little bit of the spices that I added in. I'm going to do a little more pinch of nutmeg. Sorry, I did that. I'm going to leave the salt where it is, and you could just plate this and put it on, and you'd be fine. But I gotta go farther. I gotta go just a little bit farther. So what I have is the #1 secret ingredient. Is I have a bottle of maple syrup. Now, I do not want to sweeten this dish up. This dish is sweet enough from the natural flavors and the sugars from the onions and the garlic and these glorious carrots and everything, but I do want to add a little bit of maple flavoring to it. So I'm going to add just a small amount, say a teaspoon. Okay, just a small amount. So I'm gonna let this get, and I'm gonna actually turn the heat up and get it to a point where it's telling me, oh my God, this is really hot. Now again, stop the video. You got maple flavor in these carrots and these sweet potatoes. You're good. But I am gonna take this to one more level. I can see it's bubbling hard, bubbling fast. Everything is tender, looking good. So this is where you need to stop for recipe number 2, and we're gonna move on to recipe number 3. And what I have here is, I have about 2 ounces of Crown Royal vanilla. I'm gonna flambe these in a little Crown Royal vanilla. And it's really nice because this Crown Royal does have pretty distinct vanilla flavor to it, so I don't have to add any vanilla extract where I used to do that in certain other dishes in the past. You want to make sure the pan is hot. Whoa! Ho, ho, ho. Burn off that alcohol. Let's turn that fan on. Now, let's bring it in.
We head for the sky, it's alright. Our wings wouldn't fly, it's alright. If we are crashing down again.
This is the final product. This is to the very end after I had flambéed with the brandy, with the vanilla brandy. But you could have stopped right after you roasted those carrots, and it would have been an absolutely amazing, delicious meal. So now that I have these, I'm gonna try them in the full form. I cut right through them with a fork. These red ones are so good. It's unbelievable. You know, for a second there, I almost forgot that I don't like carrots. I guess I kind of do. Alright, guys. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining me tonight on this episode of Garden State Growing, where I decided to take you from where I picked my vegetables to where I actually cook my vegetables and eat them. I thought this was a fantastic meal. I thought it was actually a very good recipe to show off because at any point you could have stopped. You know, after you put the carrots in and roasted them, you could have stopped. You didn't have to put the sweet potatoes in. You could have stopped. You know, before you put the spices in and chose to do it a different way, you could have stopped. They were very sweet. They were very tender. And they were very reminiscent of basically a very sweet potato with that carrot background to them. So I enjoyed every one of them together, but I gotta tell you, the red ones I enjoyed the most. They were the softest, they were the most flavorful, they were the sweetest ones. They were also the smaller one and the less productive one. And maybe tomorrow night, me and my wife can have this with a nice piece of fish or something. Sounds great. I love you, and I'll see you on the next episode.